So today I wanted to do like a proper hand drawing tutorial. Hope that this is somewhat helpful because I had a really hard time figuring out how to draw hands when I was learning it myself. So I wanted to do this very quick drawing tutorial just to help out anyone who might be struggling a little bit with hands. So let's get started. So first you want to find a drawing reference on the internet. Just any hand drawing will be okay. If you can find one that is just a picture of just the hands, that will be the most beneficial. Like I just have one pulled up on my screen right here. I'll show it on the video as well. And then you want to start off with kind of analyzing it, like thinking about it in like the broadest of shape where you can see like the rectangular prisms, trying to dumb down the hand into very basic shapes. So just based on the one that I'm looking at, I just want to start off with just drawing kind of a box for it. This one's a little bit more of a side view, so it will be a little bit more angular. So you just want to start off with a very rough sketch of a box. Don't be so perfect with it. It's just something to place down on the page just so you have a sort of reference, and then from there you can start making changes. If you have something on the page, it's easier for you to gauge if something is too small, too big, and etc. I'm going for the thumb next just because that's the biggest component. So just trying to dumb it down to very simple shapes, having it a little bit more I would say like a rectangle, but a little bit more of a triangular shape, and then trying to think about the box for the fingers as well. It should connect properly with the box of your hand, so you can use that as a line of reference. Thinking about the fingers in 3 parts, keeping very basic shapes, dumbing them down into prisms, just thinking about it like shapes and not exactly like individual fingers. I would say I feel like takes a little bit of pressure off. And then you can also start looking at the angle between the first finger and the thumb and seeing how steep it is. That can also be a good telltale sign if your fingers are in proportion. So most of the fingers are quite hidden over here, drawing a little bit of the knuckle over here. It's also very important, if your finger is covering the other fingers, you're drawing it through all the way, because if you don't do that, if you just draw the lines from here and here, it might not look like it connects because it might be on a separate vantage point. So it's very important to draw things through. Like you can always go back and just erase the line in the middle if you don't like the look of it, or if it comes off too dark. That can happen, so that's totally okay. I'd rather you go back in and just erase the line than you drawing 2 separate lines like that and it looks like it doesn't connect, and then it will give the impression that it's not the same finger. So just be careful about that. So just trying, just dumbing it down to the most basic shapes, seeing where the joint breaks, and then looking at where it bends, and then going from there. Having the finger connect like that, looking at the angle of the fingers over here, and then using other fingers as landmarks as well. So you can see from the photo that the 3rd finger starts roughly at the crease of the middle finger. So coming from that point and then coming out and just trying to follow the line rough. And then you would see a little bit of the palm just over here. And then your pinky. The pinky is quite hidden, I would say. But that's totally okay. Looking at this type of angle over here. And mine deviates a little bit from the reference photo, so I'm just making it up by maybe adding a line here just to indicate the pinky. And that's the very beginning structure of your hand. You also want to make sure you don't forget the wrist. The wrist is very important because it shows how the hand is in relation to the arm and how the hand is being bent. If you just have a floating hand like this, it kind of just looks a little odd. So just adding the wrist in there will just help it out. I'm looking at this line now and I think it's a little bit too straight. So I want to angle it a little bit more. So it's okay if your initial lines aren't exactly accurate. Sometimes you can't, like even for me, I can't even gauge that well sometimes. It's no problem if you go back and erase a couple lines. That's totally okay. Making sure the box continues all the way to the end of the wrist over here. And then from here you have your very basic shapes for your fingers, and then from this point you can start making them look a lot more like fingers instead of just having them just as blocks. There's no hard rule about which finger you should start on. I just go for the one that's most prominent, so either the first finger or the thumb, because that's the one that's at the forefront, so there's nothing blocking it, so that will just be the easiest to get to. So I want to analyze it a little bit more, going a little bit darker with my lines here, trying to use the structure of the finger that I drew earlier as a construction type of thing, and then tracing around it, essentially tracing around the blocks to shape out my fingers a little bit better. Looking at the creases for the folds, having the finger coming down a little bit more rounded and straight down. Looking at the other side. It's also okay if you find there's a little bit issue with your construction, because your construction should be drawn quite light. So if you go over it, you don't feel like this, like for me, I don't feel like this line is really accurate to the photo. So I want to bring that line in a little bit more, and that's totally okay as well. It's a little bit hard to see with the shadows, but there will be a knuckle here, because that's where your finger attaches, and there might be a little bit of a line to indicate the tendon, so you can add that in to make it a little bit more realistic. Thinking about the knuckles, how it goes up a little bit over here and then it comes back down. So fingers are a little bit more of a slope between two fingers, and let's say this is your tip of your finger. It tends to go a little bit like this. You can see like your own finger over here. Like some people, it's like more prominent than others, but there's a little bit of a slope because you have your knuckle that's a little bit higher and a knuckle over here a little bit more prominent, so it kind of dips down over here. It's a little bit more obvious on my finger for the second joint, so you can see here kind of dips in. It's very, very subtle. And then same here, because there's no knuckle here, it kind of dips. So thinking about that, so if we're drawing fingers a little bit more like this, having the good general shape for it. You can also think about it like tubes if you feel like that helps a little bit more. So it looks a little bit more realistic, something like that. So now I'm just going in with the rest of my fingers, looking at the reference photo. If there's folds in the finger, there tends to be a crease in the skin because you're bending the skin a little bit as well. Always looking up at your reference photo, because that will help you keep it most accurate. Having the knuckle coming inwards like this just a little bit before it connects to the back of your palm. I'm just going to finish up the rest of the fingers over here. So right now I have the fingers kind of cleaned up, more or less. You have the outline for it and you have a little bit of the construction underneath. Now you want to focus a little bit more on the skin fold. For this reference photo especially, focus a little bit more on how the palm connects to the fingers, because this part is just a little bit more tricky. So watching the palm, but this section is a little bit more in front than the rest. So having the two skin folds a little bit over here, and then you can see a little bit of the crease of the palm from the other side as well. So drawing that line in and making sure it matches up. And then at this stage you can start adding nails. You kind of want to think about the nails as separate to the finger. So if you have your finger over here, or even here, if you have your finger and your nail, it's on a different plane. What I mean is, if you look at it from the side over here, you can see that your finger kind of comes through like this, and then your nail, it kind of sits within your finger and it kind of comes out. So it's a little bit more slanted, I would say, the angle of your nail compared to your finger. So it isn't necessarily a straight line all the way through. So what I mean is, oh my god, it was out of focus. Here, let me just draw it again really quickly. So what I was saying is, if you have a finger, your nail won't look like this. Like if it was a very simple hand, it could look like this, but if we're drawing a more realistic hand, you got to think about how the angles of the finger in relation to the nail is a little bit different. So starting off with kind of the same finger, if we have the nail like this and it comes out like that, we have the line for your finger, and then your nail kind of comes in a little bit and then it wraps around. So you can think about your nail kind of like a bandage. It wraps around your finger. It's not necessarily like flushed in with your finger. The nail kind of wraps around the top of your finger over here. So just keeping that in mind, making sure that this angle is just a little bit different. So you have this line coming this way, and then the nail is heading towards this direction. This is a better photo. I drew this earlier, but then my camera was out of focus, unfortunately. So it's a little bit closer to this. So yeah, I just drew in the nails for like a front view. It will be pretty parallel, more or less. There will be a slight deviation. So this is the thumb. It'll kind of come in a little bit, and then it'll have its base, and then your top of your nail, and it'll kind of come in like that. So you can just see from your own nail as well, it kind of comes in at an angle like that, and then it flattens out, and it's a little bit more of a triangular shape, I would say. So drawing in the nails where you can see them, most of them, it's a little bit more of a side view. And then you have a very well constructed hand. And then from here, you can start making tiny changes if you're looking back at it and there's certain things that you don't like or you feel like it looks off. And then you can also start doing a little bit of the details of the skin. Of course, not too much, but adding like the wrinkles you can see on the photo. It's a little bit hard because of the lighting, but you can still see there's a little bit of wrinkles, especially at the joints over here. It kind of makes an eye shape. Usually the wrinkles over here, because it kind of just wraps around your joint. So it's a little bit more of this shape, more or less, just on your finger, especially on your joints. Over here, sometimes there might be a couple lines like this, a couple skin folds. It's a little hard to tell in this photo just because of the lighting. Maybe a little bit at the wrist, not a lot. And then from here, you can do a little bit of shading if you want to add a little bit more of a tonal value to it. I would say stick to a little bit more of like the simple cross-hatching technique, just so the lines are a little bit clearer and things don't get smudged. Of course, you can do whatever you want. You can have a smudge stick and actually use graphite properly and like actually smudge it and things like that. But for me, I think I want to stick a little bit more to the cross-hatching technique, just so it's a little bit clearer. I'm just marking out a little bit of the shadow lines because the shadows are quite harsh for this finger. So the lines are quite defined, I would say. So it's just a little bit easier to see. So you can just map out the shadows a bit before you start going in with your cross hatching. And shadows are also very good in telling you the planes of the finger, showing you what planes are a little bit flatter and what planes are just a little bit more of an angle. You can see here there's a very clear tilt, I would say, for the thumb, because you can see the light is hitting the top area of the thumb but not the bottom. So you can see that this is top plane and this is more of a downward plane. So lighting is also pretty good in terms of helping you gauge the angles of the hand and seeing where the light catches and where the light doesn't. And there you have it, a nice hand that has been dumbed down to its very base construction before adding a little bit more details and making it look more like a hand. Well, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about anything about drawing hands or stuff like that, just let me know. If there is anything else you want me to demonstrate, a little bit more of a tutorial, maybe feet or eyes, faces, I'm not exactly sure. But if there's any other tutorials that you want to see or any other things that you find difficulty drawing, just comment it down below and I will try to make a video about it. So hopefully this was helpful and you found it somewhat useful, and I hope you at least learned one thing today. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I will see you guys later in my next video. Bye!